The sound of the key turning in my bedroom lock echoed like a gunshot in the pre-dawn silence. My heart leaped into my throat as I realized I couldn't open the door. From the other side, my daughter's voice cut through the air like a knife. "Dad, I need you to transfer your retirement funds to me. It's the only way you're getting out of that room." At 68, after a lifetime dedicated to her, I was being held prisoner by the girl I raised with so much love. Milena, my 30-year-old daughter, had become a dangerous stranger overnight. But I knew that behind that desperate look, there was something she couldn't tell me. And it was in that moment, locked in the room I'd painted myself years ago, that I began to understand that maybe I was also responsible for this tragedy. The next few hours crawled by like a nightmare, in slow motion. Every sound outside made me jump. Her nervous footsteps in the hallway, whispered phone conversations, the sound of furniture being dragged. My mind raced, trying to find a logical explanation for this absurd situation. How did we get here? How did the sweet girl, who used to hug me every morning, transform into this cold, calculating person, holding me hostage? I tried to remember when things started to change. Maybe it was 6 months ago, when Milena became more withdrawn. She'd always been a cheerful young woman, working as a nurse at the city hospital, with friends, dreams. After her mother, Helen's, death 5 years ago, we'd supported each other. We were a team, a small but united family. Or at least, that's what I believed. In recent months, however, something had changed drastically. Milena started coming home late, always nervous, looking over her shoulder as if she were being pursued. Her hands trembled when she held her phone, and she developed a habit of locking her bedroom door. When I asked if everything was all right, she'd reply with a forced smile. "Of course, Dad, I'm just tired from work." Now, sitting on the bed, where I had slept beside Helen for so many years, I understood that I should have insisted more. I should have broken through the invisible wall she'd erected between us. As a father, I failed to notice the danger signs, and now I was paying the price for that emotional neglect. Morning light began to filter through the curtains, creating golden stripes on the floor. I could hear Milena moving around the house, dragging things, speaking softly on the phone. There was an urgency in her movements that worried me even more. I approached the door and pressed my ear against the wood, trying to catch a word, a clue about what was happening. "I'll get the money today. Yes, I promise. Please, give me one more day." Her voice was filled with desperation, almost pleading. My heart broke hearing her. My daughter was in trouble, and I didn't even know what it was about. Then, the memories came flooding back. Milena had always been a sensitive child, deeply affected by her mother's premature death. Helen died of cancer when Milena was only 25, just as she was building her career and discovering who she was as an adult. The loss devastated our daughter in a way I never fully understood. I remembered how Milena cried at the funeral, clinging to my arm as if she were going to fall apart. "Dad, I don't know how to live without her," she said that day. I, trying to be strong for both of us, replied, "We'll be okay, honey. We have each other." But maybe I never really taught her how to cope with grief. Maybe I was too strong, and she never learned that it was okay to be fragile sometimes. After the funeral, I threw myself into work as a way to escape my own pain. I worked as an accountant at a small firm, and I started doing overtime constantly. I came home late, exhausted, and found Milena watching TV alone. She always said she was fine when I asked. And I, cowardly, accepted that answer because I didn't know how to deal with my own sadness either. Helen had always been the emotional anchor of our family. She knew how to talk, how to listen, how to hug at the right time. I was good at providing, at solving practical problems, but matters of the heart were always her domain. When Helen died, Milena and I were left like two castaways, trying to save ourselves without knowing how to swim. In the first few years after Helen's death, Milena threw herself into work with an intensity that worried me. She did double shifts at the hospital, studied for specializations, and went out very little. When I suggested she should have more fun, meet people, she replied, "Dad, work keeps me focused. That's what I need right now." I respected that choice, but maybe I should have realized she was using work as a way to avoid facing her own pain. It was around the age of 27 that Milena started going out more. She made some friends at the hospital, and started going to bars and parties. At first I was happy. Finally, she was allowing herself to live a little. But gradually, the outings became more frequent, and she started coming home later and later. Sometimes, she wouldn't come home all night. When I expressed concern, she got angry. "Dad, I'm a grown woman. You can't control me forever." She wasn't wrong, but there was something in the way she spoke, an aggressiveness that didn't match her personality, that made me uneasy. Still, I backed down. After years of being overprotective, I was trying to give her the space she seemed to want. Now, locked in this room, I realized I'd misinterpreted everything. Milena didn't want space, she wanted help, but didn't know how to ask. And I, for fear of being controlling, ended up being neglectful. How many nights must she have cried alone in her room, while I pretended to sleep on the other side of the wall? How many times did she try to tell me about her problems, only to give up because I was distracted or tired? Hours crawled by on that first day of captivity. Milena passed the door several times, but didn't say anything. I tried to talk to her a few times, knocking softly and calling her name, but she didn't answer. In the afternoon, I heard the sound of someone arriving home, male voices, low but tense. My blood ran cold. "Milena, are you sure you can get the money today?" The voice was rough, threatening. "Because if you can't, you know what's going to happen." "Yes, I can. My dad will transfer his retirement funds to my account this afternoon. It's just a matter of hours." Milena's voice trembled, but there was a desperate determination in it that broke my heart. "I hope so, sweetheart. Because you know we don't like to wait." The man laughed, a cruel sound that made me clench my fists. "And if you're lying, well, you know where we live." I heard heavy footsteps fading away, and the front door closing. Then the sound of Milena softly crying in the living room. At that moment, all my anger turned into a painful understanding. My daughter wasn't blackmailing me out of malice, she was desperate, probably threatened by dangerous people. I approached the door again, and whispered, "Milena, honey, I heard everything. You don't need to keep me locked in here. Let's talk, let's solve this together." Absolute silence. Then footsteps approaching the door. "Dad, you don't understand." Her voice was broken, filled with shame. "I got myself into a situation that has no way out. These people don't mess around. If I don't give them the money today, they'll hurt me. Daughter, tell me everything. We'll find a solution. We always have, haven't we?" I tried to sound calm, but my voice also trembled. "No, Dad. Not this time. I messed everything up. I have an addiction." The confession came out as a desperate sigh. "It started 2 years ago, when I met a friend at work. She took me to some places, said it was just to relax, after difficult shifts. At first it was just fun. But she stopped talking, and I heard sobs on the other side of the door. My heart shattered. How could I have been so blind? How did I not notice that my daughter was destroying herself right under my nose? Milena, listen. No matter what happened, you're my daughter and I love you. We'll solve this together. Understand? But first, you need to let me out of here. Locked in this room, I can't help you." "No, Dad. If I open this door, you'll want to call the police, or you'll try something heroic that will only make things worse. They made it very clear that if I involve other people, they'll get rid of me." From that moment on, our conversation turned into an emotional negotiation through a wooden door. I tried to convince her that there were other solutions, that we could seek professional help, that she didn't need to face this alone. She insisted it was too late, that the only way to get out of this alive was to get the money immediately. Throughout the rest of the day, fragments of the story were revealed. Milena had started using drugs as a way to cope with the pain of her mother's death and the stress of work. What started as recreational use quickly turned into addiction. She started borrowing money from dealers, thinking she could stop whenever she wanted and pay it all back. But the addiction only grew, and so did the debts. When it finally became clear that she couldn't pay, the dealers started with the threats. First, it was just words, then minor intimidation. The week before the day she locked me in the room, they had shown up at the city hospital, where she worked, and made it clear that they knew where we lived, and that they wouldn't hesitate to solve the problem in a more definitive way. As I heard the full story, I felt increasingly guilty. As a father, I had failed to offer Milena the emotional support she needed after Helen's death. I was so focused on moving on that I never noticed my daughter was falling apart inside. But I also began to understand that I couldn't solve this situation simply by transferring my retirement funds to her. Giving money to dealers would only fuel the vicious cycle. Milena needed professional help, and we both needed to find a way to deal with those threats without giving in to blackmail. During the night, while Milena slept in the living room, she had said she couldn't sleep in her own room, knowing I was locked up. I started to devise a plan. I knew some people who could help us. A co-worker who was married to a social worker specializing in substance abuse, a neighbor who was a retired police officer and still had contacts on the force. If I could convince Milena to trust me, maybe we could find a way out that didn't involve feeding the criminal scheme. The next morning, I woke up to the smell of coffee coming from the kitchen. It was a familiar and comforting aroma that brought back memories of when we were a complete family. Helen always made coffee early, and Milena used to join us at the kitchen table before leaving for work. How many precious moments like those had I wasted, assuming we'd always have them? Milena? I called softly. She didn't answer immediately, but I heard footsteps approaching. Good morning, Dad. Her voice was calmer than the day before, but still tinged with sadness. Honey, I've been thinking all night. I have a proposal for you. Dad, no, please, hear me out. I understand you're scared, and you have reason to be. But giving money to these people won't solve the problem. It will only delay it. And meanwhile, your addiction will continue to grow until it completely destroys you. There was a long pause. Then she said, almost whispering, so what do you suggest? That I die? Of course not. I suggest we seek real help. I know people who can help us deal with this situation safely. But for that, you need to trust me. Dad, you don't understand how dangerous these people are. Maybe I don't understand completely, but I understand that my daughter is suffering, and I can't stand idly by. Milena, answer me one thing. Do you really believe that even if I gave you all the money from my retirement today, that would be the end of your problems? Another long silence. Then, a broken answer. No, I know it wouldn't. It was at that moment that I felt a small crack open. Milena was beginning to see that the solution she had imagined wasn't really a solution. Then let me really help you. Not as a controlling father who wants to solve everything alone, but as someone who loves you and wants to be by your side while you recover. To strengthen our connection and show that I was genuinely committed to understanding and supporting her, I started sharing things about myself with Milena that I had never shared before. I talked about my own struggle with depression after Helen's death, about how for months I took sleeping pills because I couldn't cope with the silence of the house. I talked about the days I came home from work and cried in the bathroom, so she wouldn't see. Why didn't you ever tell me this before? She asked, and for the first time her voice had a less defensive tone. Because I thought I needed to be strong for both of us. I thought that if you saw me weak, it would worsen your pain. But I was wrong. I think if we had shared our pain, maybe we both would have coped better with it. That afternoon, our conversation through the door transformed into something different. It was no longer a desperate negotiation, but a dialogue between a father and daughter who were finally being honest with each other. Milena told me about how guilty she felt for not being a perfect daughter after her mother's death, about how the addiction had started as a way to silence the obsessive thoughts about her own mortality, and about the constant fear of losing me too. I, in turn, took responsibility for creating a home environment where she felt pressured to be okay all the time. I acknowledged that my way of dealing with problems, focusing only on practical solutions and avoiding emotional conversations, had contributed to her not feeling comfortable asking for help when she needed it. If you've gotten this far in this story, you know that sometimes the most desperate situations can be the beginning of a profound transformation. Keep following stories like this, where we explore the complexity of family relationships and the power of redemption, because I believe that all these stories can teach us something about our own journey. On the second day of captivity, something fundamentally changed between us. Milena started spending more time near the bedroom door, sometimes just sitting on the other side, in silence. These weren't uncomfortable silences, but moments of closeness we hadn't had in years. It was as if the physical door between us had become a metaphor for all the emotional barriers we had built, and now we were trying to break them down one by one. During one of these conversations, Milena told me about Amanda, the co-worker who had introduced her to the world of drugs. Amanda was a few years older, seemed to have everything under control, and had approached Milena at a time of particular vulnerability, shortly after the second anniversary of Helen's death. She said she understood my pain, because she had also lost her mother young. Milena explained. She said she knew a way to turn off sad thoughts for a few hours. At first, it really worked. For a few hours, I could really laugh, feel light. But gradually you needed more to get the same relief. I finished. Exactly. And when I realized I was addicted, it was too late. Amanda wasn't the friend I thought she was. She earned commission by bringing new clients to the dealers. I was just another fish in her net. This revelation brought me intense anger, but also a clearer understanding of the situation. Milena hadn't simply chosen to become addicted, she had been manipulated by someone who took advantage of her emotional vulnerability. This didn't diminish her responsibility for the current situation, but it contextualized how she had gotten there. It was at that moment that I shared my plan with her. I knew Roberto, my retired police neighbor, who still had contacts in the force, and could advise us on how to deal with the threats safely. I also knew Marina, the wife of a co-worker, who was a specialist in chemical dependency, and could help Milena find the right treatment. But Dad, if they find out we're involving other people, Milena, these people already know where we live. They've already threatened you at your work. The situation is already out of control. The only difference is that now we can choose between facing this intelligently, with help, or continuing to give in to blackmail, until we have nothing left to give. I spent the rest of the day developing a detailed strategy. First, talk to Robert about the best way to document the threats and legally protect Milena. Second, contact Marina to immediately begin addiction treatment. Third, and most importantly, establish an emotional support system, so Milena would never again feel alone in facing her difficulties. What if it doesn't work? She asked, after hearing my entire proposal. Then at least we tried our best. Milena, the path you're on right now has no happy ending. You know that. The only real chance we have is to face the problem head on together. On the morning of the third day, I woke up to a different sound. Milena was fiddling with the doorknob. My heart pounded. Was this a trap? Had she changed her mind again? The door opened slowly, and I saw my daughter for the first time in 3 days. She was visibly worn down, with deep dark circles under her eyes, and rumpled clothes, but there was something different about her face. For the first time in months, she looked me directly in the eyes. "Dad," she said, her voice choked with emotion. "I can't live like this anymore." I slowly got out of bed and opened my arms. She hesitated for a moment, then ran to me like a frightened child. We embraced there in the middle of the room, crying together all the accumulated pain of the past few years. It was the first real hug we'd shared since Helen's funeral. "I'm so sorry, Dad. I'm sorry for everything. For losing myself, for locking you in here, for causing so much suffering. I'm sorry too, honey. I'm sorry for not realizing you needed help, for not being the father you deserved after your mother's death." At that moment, I understood that both Milena and I had lost ourselves in grief. She lost herself in drugs. I lost myself in work and emotional denial. But now, embraced there in the room that had become a prison, and then a sanctuary of reconciliation, we were finding each other again. The following days were intense and challenging. We rigorously followed the plan we had developed. Robert helped us document all the threats and establish a security protocol. We discovered that Amanda and the dealers she worked with had been on the police's radar for some time, and Milena agreed to cooperate with the investigation in exchange for protection. Marina became more than a therapist for Milena. She became a mentor and friend. She helped us understand that addiction is a disease, not a moral failing, and that recovery would be a long process requiring constant support and a great deal of patience. The hardest part was when the dealers discovered that Milena had sought legal help. They made a few final attempts at intimidation, but this time we were prepared. Robert coordinated an operation that resulted in the arrest of several people in the network, including Amanda. Milena went through a period of supervised withdrawal that was physically and emotionally brutal. There were times when she wanted to give up, times when she begged me to let her just use one more time. But this time I was truly present, not just physically, but emotionally present in a way I hadn't been able to be since Helen's death. During this process, we both went to therapy, individual and family. I learned about codependency, about how my attempt to protect Milena from difficult conversations had in fact left her unprepared to deal with adversity. She learned techniques to cope with anxiety and depression without resorting to substances, and slowly began to rebuild her self-esteem. One of the most transformative moments happened about 2 months after that weekend of captivity. We were both in the kitchen, me making breakfast while she read a book on recovery that Marina had recommended. Suddenly, she looked at me and said, "Dad, I think I understand now why you locked me in that room with you." I stopped stirring the eggs and looked at her, confused. "Honey, you locked me in the room, remember?" She smiled, a genuine smile I hadn't seen in years. "No, Dad. Physically, yes, I locked the door. But what really happened was that you stayed there on the other side, refusing to give up on me. Even when I was being cruel, even when I was trying to use you, you kept talking to me, kept reminding me of who I really was beneath all that despair." At that moment, I understood that the 3 days I spent locked in that room hadn't been a prison. They had been an opportunity for both of us to finally stop running away from difficult conversations, complex emotions, the reality that we were two wounded people trying to heal. Milena returned to work at the city hospital after 4 months, but this time with a completely different perspective. She became an advocate for mental health among her colleagues, helping other professionals in the field recognize signs of burnout and seek help before it was too late. As for me, I learned to balance my protective instincts with respect for my adult daughter's autonomy. I learned that being present doesn't mean solving all her problems, but being available to support her as she solves her own problems. I learned that true strength isn't never showing vulnerability, but being transparent about my own struggles so that she feels safe sharing hers. Today, more than a year after that life-changing weekend, our house is alive again. Not the same life as before, that will never return, because we lost Helen and none of us are the same people we were before that tragedy. But a new life, built on a foundation of emotional honesty and mutual support that we had never had before. Milena has been sober for 8 months, attends support group meetings regularly, and has built a strong network of friends who share her commitment to sobriety. She's dating a guy she met in group therapy, someone who understands her journey, because he's been through a similar one. I in turn started attending a support group for families of people with substance abuse. I learned that I'm not the only father who felt lost and helpless in the face of a child's suffering. I learned that unconditional love doesn't mean accepting any behavior, but rather staying committed to the well-being of the loved one, even when it requires difficult conversations and decisions. Our nights are now filled with real conversations. We talk about Helen with affection, but without the crushing weight of guilt we carried before. We talk about our fears, our dreams, our mistakes. Sometimes we disagree, sometimes one of us has a tough day, but we never again return to the toxic silence that almost destroyed our family. My bedroom door hasn't been locked since that day, but more importantly, the doors of our hearts are open to each other, in a way they never were before. I learned that sometimes you have to be physically confined to be emotionally freed. Sometimes you have to hit rock bottom to discover you still have the strength to swim back to the surface. Milena taught me that redemption isn't about erasing the past, it's about using the painful lessons of the past to build a better future. She taught me that strength isn't about never falling, but about getting up as many times as it takes. And most importantly, she taught me that it's never too late to become the father, the daughter, the person you always had the potential to be. Looking back at those 3 days that began as the worst nightmare of my life, I see that they were in fact the most precious gift I've ever received. They were the days I learned that true love isn't about protecting someone from all difficulties, it's about being there for that person as they face and overcome those difficulties. Today, when Milena leaves for work,
I no longer lie awake worrying, imagining terrible scenarios. Not because I don't care, but because I trust her and the work we've done together to rebuild our relationship and her life. And when she comes home, we don't pretend everything is okay if it isn't. We talk, we support each other, we find solutions together. The house is no longer silent. It's full of life, laughter, music, conversations. It's filled with the sound of a family that has learned the true meaning of being present for each other. And as paradoxical as it may seem, I only truly found my daughter after she locked me in that room and forced us to tear down all the invisible walls we had built between us. Sometimes redemption comes through the most unlikely circumstances. Sometimes physical confinement is what sets us free emotionally. And sometimes the people we love most are the very ones who need to hurt us deeply to help us grow. Our story is proof that it's never too late to start over, never too late to choose love over fear, honesty over denial. 6 months after that episode that almost destroyed our family, Milena asked me a question that has forever been etched in my memory. Dad, do you forgive me for locking you in that room? I looked her in the eyes that had regained the sparkle I thought I'd lost forever, and answered without hesitation, Honey, there's nothing to forgive. Those were the most important 3 days of my life as your father. They were the days I finally learned to truly listen to you. And it was at that moment that I understood the deepest lesson of this whole experience. Sometimes what seems to be our greatest tragedy is in fact our greatest opportunity for transformation. The room that became my prison was also the place where I rediscovered my daughter. The locked door that physically separated me from her was what finally paved the way for our true emotional closeness. Today, when I walk past that room, which has returned to being simply a room, no longer a symbol of conflict, I feel gratitude. Gratitude for the 3 most difficult days of my life, because they were the ones that taught me that true love isn't about having all the answers, but about being willing to ask the right questions. It's not about being perfect, but about being present. It's not about avoiding pain, but about going through it together. Milena and I discovered that family isn't just about blood or obligations. It's about choosing every day to be available for those we love. It's about having the courage to be vulnerable, to admit when we're wrong, to ask for help when we need it. It's about building bridges where there were once walls, about creating light where there was once only darkness. Our story doesn't end with a fairy tale happily ever after. It ends with something far more valuable, the certainty that no matter how lost we may feel, there's always a way back home. And sometimes that home isn't a place, it's the heart of someone who loves us unconditionally and is willing to fight for us even when we're fighting against ourselves. In the end, I learned that being a father isn't about having all the answers or protecting my daughter from all dangers. It's about being there for her as she discovers her own answers and develops the strength to face her own challenges. It's about being the safe harbor she can return to when life's storms become too intense. Milena taught me that being a daughter isn't about being perfect or never disappointing those who love you. It's about having the courage to ask for help when you need it, about accepting that we're human and fallible, about using our mistakes as stepping stones to become better people. The key Milena turned in that lock didn't just confine me physically, it unlocked our ability to connect emotionally in a way we'd never experienced before. And for that, paradoxically, I will be eternally grateful for the 3 hardest days of my life, because they were the days that gave me back my daughter and taught me the true meaning of being a father. In the end, I learned that unconditional love doesn't mean accepting any behavior. It means remaining committed to the well-being of the loved one, even when that requires setting boundaries, even when that requires painful conversations, even when that requires both of you to step outside your comfort zones to grow. Our story is living proof that it's never too late to start over, never too late to choose healing over hurt, connection over isolation, hope over despair. It's proof that the darkest situations can contain the seeds of the most beautiful transformation, and that true love has the power to transform even the most traumatic experiences into bridges to a fuller and more authentic life. And that's the lesson I want to leave for anyone facing similar situations. Don't give up. Not on yourselves, not on the people you love, not on the possibility that tomorrow can be completely different from today. Because sometimes the doors that seem to imprison us are the very ones that, when finally opened, reveal the path to our truest freedom.